In the UK, there are a number of plants that you can grow to give your garden an exotic look.
Now, the key to getting a sort of exotic jungle look in any garden is building up depth within the borders with lots of foliage. And this can be done in a number of ways. But the first thing to think about is the types and shapes of foliage you want to use. There are lots of options. So you've got things such as this tree fern here, which is quite a dainty, sort of feathery foliage. You've got some of the foliages of more Japanese plants, such as these waxy foliages of the camellia, and also the fatsias as well. And then you have some of the more interesting shape foliages, such as those that you can get in things such as taro. And when you start to mix these together, you start to get a really sort of deep, dynamic looking foliage-based bed. And today I'm going to talk about some of my favourites and how to grow them. So when you think of jungle gardening here in the UK, the first plants you probably think of are the mousas. And these are a solid go-to if you're not in too heavy of a frost area. Otherwise it becomes a lot harder to keep them alive. But down here in the south, they're very easy to survive the winter. We've got two varieties here. The one on my right is the standard Musa Baju. The one on my left is the red variation. These plants are essentially a type of grass, and so they will constantly put out new foliage, and they've got this huge patterned foliage that looks incredibly good within a built-up garden bed. A single plant will form clumps, so you'll have one plant and then over time you might need to separate it, but typically you want to leave at least 3 or 4 plants within a clump to get that nice fuller look. My favourite out of the two is the red variant, just because you get these nice red bleeds across the leaf. However, the green variant, if you're in colder temperate regions, is a bit hardier, though I do find that my experience is that the leaves on these are smaller, and I'm not such a big fan of the patterning of them. Obviously, to care for these plants, they are frost tender, so what you need to do is once you've planted them and they've got their roots established before the winter, let the foliage die back with the sort of lighter frosts, and by the time a heavy frost comes, make sure you've cleaned that foliage, you wrap it to keep it warm and frost-free, and then for better protection you may want to add mulch around the roots to protect the roots and keep them alive, but also add something to stop the rain seeping into the main stem and killing the crown. But really, these are very versatile plants and can be used in multiple planting schemes, and they are probably the best ones in terms of creating a very tropical look. The next plant I'm going to talk about are Canna lilies. Now you can get lots of different sizes of these. Again, like the bananas, they have very similar, somewhat waxy foliage, but these will flower and make really nice flowers, and that's the main feature of them. These work really nicely in the same border as having a musa. So we've got mine nearby here, and you can get different sizes of these as well. So you get quite compact ones that you see we've got here, and these are sort of front border, but you can also get really tall ones. My experience is if you're in a milder region, you can keep these in the ground year round. If you're not, take them out of the ground, pop them on, and put them in a frost-free area. But otherwise, all you need to do, I've found, is once the foliage starts dying back, cut it right back, do a heavy mulch, and then by spring, take off some of that mulch, and you will have, hopefully, your cannas grown through. But it is a little bit of a risk depending upon whether you get too much rain, whether you do get a very heavy frost. But we had -5 this year and a very heavy precipitation winter, and we still have them. In fact, I've divided them this year, so we've got 2 smaller plants now. Now, this is maybe one of my favourite plants at the moment, and I think is one that really does look good within a tropical border, and that is taro. Now, this is a plant that grows natively to Africa and Asia. It is frost tender, so what you need to do is, once the foliage starts to die back at the end of the year, take the corn out. There's no point in leaving that in the ground. It will probably die in heavy precipitation and also in frost. So This one's a lot less frost hardy than some of the other varieties. Elephant ears, which is the other variety we have in the border that's just coming through, might be a bit hardier, but in my opinion, just take them out of the ground and grow them as fresh plants each year. But they do put on a lot of size, as you can see with this one here. Now, how you can use this plant, I would say, is probably closer to the front of the border. You see, I've got this sort of in a middle position here, but I think the leaves are somewhat wasted with that more unique spade foliage. And actually, I think if you brought that forward in front of, say, Musa, with your Canna lilies potentially, it would add really nice interest and something that you don't often see as much in English gardens, even though they can be grown. So a wider category of plants I would consider within more of a jungly looking border are, just generally speaking, Japanese plants. There are quite a lot, obviously, within that broad category, but there are a number that I would pick out because they can thrive in shade and they create nice dense foliage and also are often evergreen. So things such as camellias, these will also create flowers in the winter period, but they have nice waxy leaves, get quite tall and have nice sort of bark. You've got the fatsias, which are nice palmate leaves, again waxy, evergreen, will do well in shade. They can get quite big, but I'm using this one as sort of like a mid-border, back-border plant at the moment. This one in particular, because of the leaves, really stand out and work quite well with some of your palms, for example. If you've got any palms, pairing them up with the fatsia would look really good, especially something like the windmill palm. And then acers. Now, this one you might not think as much of a jungle plant, but what's nice about acers is where they come in lots of colours and they also have lots of different types of foliage. You can really find one that will work quite well in sort of like a layered garden with things such as your ferns and your palms. And actually, as you start to layer, this can add another dimension of depth to that garden. So for me, what I'm trying to do in this border here is establish lots of ferns around the base. So you'll have the ferns sort of at the undergrowth, you'll have the acer breaking up some of that green, and then you'll have some of the taller scaly male ferns at the back that will come over the top of that eventually. And so it will add sort of a little bit of a break between all this green foliage. And of course, on that topic, ferns. Ferns are synonymous with deep, dark, damp jungles. There are lots of choices that you can choose that will grow within a jungle border in the UK. You've got some of the native ones, such as scaly male ferns. These will get to about 1.5 meters high and are half evergreen or semi-evergreen. And so if it's not too bad of a winter, they won't die back. If it is, and they'll stay evergreen, or at least they'll lose some of their leaves. If it's a bad winter, they might die back, but they will come back and they grow very vigorously. Especially the scaly male ones, they can get very tall and they have these nice feathery foliage. Of course, all ferns grow in dark, damp conditions, but there are some if you need dry sort of shade ferns as well. Notably, my favourites amongst these are this variety here and this one here. These are Jurassic Gold, and they create, if they get in the sun a little bit, they start to turn a little bit yellow and orange, which actually creates a nice bit of depth to that border, especially when you've got a border that's full of greens such as ferns. It helps distinguish the shapes a lot better. The one we got at the front here is a baby tree fern. Of course, these are very famously grown in exotic borders here in the UK. They come from Australia. Do your research on these. I personally would recommend them if you like the foliage, if you want to get baby ones. They will be grown from propagule or seed in a nursery. As soon as you start getting the ones with trunks, I would let you do the research on that because they come from old growth forests. And although some will say they're sustainable in that the logging trade will already be logging old growth forest and they are just the byproduct, it's up to you whether you want to be buying a tree fern with a log that may have come from an ancient forest. I'm not going to be the judge on that. You need to do the research and decide if that is what you want to do. But if you want the foliage, or you want to grow one over the course of your lifetime, these younger ones are typically grown from nursery stock. I've got a number of palms grown here in my garden. This one here is a Washingtonia palm that I've been growing from seed, and I'm keeping in a pot in shelter for the time being until it gets bigger. But the great thing with palms in this country is that there are many varieties that won't need protection, such as the Phoenix palm, some of the Washingtonias, particularly windmill palms. They are incredibly frost hardy, and they will grow in shade, they will grow in most soil types, and they will stay evergreen. And really, this is one of the best foliage plants you can put in your garden if you want to get that nice jungle look to your borders. Obviously, look up what would do best in your region, but also look online as well, because there are, although in the shops you'll typically see Phoenix palms, you'll see you might see Washingtonians, actually you might not. You'll probably see windmill palms, but there are lots of variety of hardier palms that are actually out there that just typically aren't on sale in your local garden centre. But if you really want to get something unique, you can get a number of varieties that can survive the UK winters. If you want a nice big sort of tree foliage, something that can go at the back, or something that could even produce fruit, I would highly recommend the figs. Now this is fig brown turkey, as is the other one back there. And these are deciduous, so they won't stay evergreen throughout the winter, but they produce very nice free-lobed foliage, as you can see there. And also, if you've had a good year, will grow fruits. They're best grown along walls if you want fruit, but can be at the back of a border for that nice sort of back border interest. They are hard enough to survive the UK winters without any additional protection, and will work better in a drier bed. So if you're actually building more of a dry sort of exotic look, so using maybe dry shade ferns, you want to use some of the palms, you may want to use a fig as well. That will make like quite a nice dry exotic border. But there is nothing really special about figs other than the fact that if you don't want them to take over your garden with their roots, put them in what we call a fig trap, where essentially you're constraining the roots with, say, concrete or slabs, and this will keep them not only from overtaking your garden, but will also allow you to get lots of fruits off the trees, hopefully, because it will put that energy into growing fruit rather than growing leaves. Last, but certainly not least, and maybe a little bit of a tip or a technique, although I don't know if I can call it that, would be to bring your indoor plants outside. Most of the plants you grow all of the plants you grow in your house are at least exotic plants. At the very least, a lot of them are coming originally from jungles. So this one I've got in my hand here is Musa Cavendish. This is the commercial banana that is grown in places like Africa. This wouldn't survive at all outdoors in the winter, spring, maybe autumn time, but it does survive outdoors in the summer. Then things like my Monstera, for example, has grown incredibly big in the house, and this would look really good in a pot in, say, my shadier parts of my patio. I haven't moved this outside, but it would look nice if, say, I was having people around and I really wanted to sort of emphasize that exotic look in my garden for having maybe a party or something. But either way, if you want to, you can in the summer, especially in the warmer parts of the country, bring your indoor plants outdoors. You may not want to keep them out there overnight. You may find it's completely fine depending on the plants. Look at the sort of care requirements before you make any sort of choices such as that, because all plants require different conditions, and actually you might find that some of your indoor plants won't, but for your hardier ones, they will be fine outdoors in the sort of height of summer. But the one tip really, if you're going to do that and add your put your indoor plants outside, is to slowly acclimatise them. Obviously, being indoors for all their lives, they might not be used to the light levels, even when you say put them in the shade, that will be afforded outdoors, even when they are in direct light, for example, in the window, they still aren't getting full direct light because they've got a roof over their heads, you know. So they're not getting the absolute full intensity of the sun, and plants can get sunburnt very easily. So if you do want to try that, acclimatise them slowly, bring them out for a few hours at a time, bring them back in, and then you might be able to keep them outdoors. But it really is just a tip in case you want to really lean into that for a particular reason. But otherwise, all the outdoor plants I've talked about will add to that feel. Anyway, I hope this video has been interesting and useful, and I hope you have a go at least trying one of these types of plants in your garden, because I think all of them have some really nice ornamental value. If you're interested in this type of content, please stay subscribed, and I'll be looking to create new stuff in the future similar to this, but also lots of different stuff too.